Welcome, everyone, to the People's Debate League. I'm your host, Vincent, and I'm here today to talk to you about the four schools of philosophy, mathematics. According to the article that I read, that I've been working on or reading from, called the Stanford Encyclopedia, uh, it goes into talking about four schools. And I would definitely like to read those four schools and get an understanding from those four schools and share those four schools of mathematics or a philosophy of mathematics that I think are important. Once again, I'm going to try to read this to the best of my ability. Um, I realized a couple of words I was reading yesterday that are dawned on me today. I had to laugh at myself because I was like, that's intuitionism. It's intuitionism. I kept saying it wrong the whole time. I kept trying to break it up, by the, break it up and put it together and that I'll catch it, but I didn't. And that's intuitionism. And I'm going to read over those for schools today. So let me go back into here, see where I'm at. And like I said before, I don't have all the answers. I'm studying and learning, and I'm sharing my information as I go. So here it is, four schools. Logicism, that's logic. Um, Intuitionism, formalism, predicate. Here's another one, predicativism. To predicate. Okay, there's predicativism. Okay, so those are the four we're going to focus on today. And next, we'll focus on Platonianism. If I said that right, Platonism. Okay, so here it is. Sorry about that. Uh, Four schools. The general philosophy and sorry, the general philosophical scientific outlook in the 19th century tended toward the empirical Platonic, Platonistic aspects of naturalistic theories of mathematics were rapidly losing support, especially the once highly praised faculty of national intuition of ideas was regarded with suspicious. Thus, in thus it became a challenge to formulate a philosophical theory of mathematics that was free of Platonistic elements. In the first decade of the 20th century, there are three non-Platonistic amounts of mathematicals were developed: logicism, formalism, and intuitionism. These three emerged into the beginning of the 20th century. Also, the fourth program, predicativism, due to contingent historical circumstances, its true potential was not thought, not until the 1960s. However, it deserved a place beside the three traditional schools that are discussed in most standard contemporary introductions to philosophy and mathematics, such as Shapiro 2000 and Lamibo 2017. Please forgive, I messed those names up. I'm trying to pronounce them the best that I can. And here's two, logicism. The logistic project consists in an attempt to reduce mathematics to logic, since logic is supposed to be neutral about matters chronological. This object seems to harmonize with the anti-Platonistic atmosphere of the time. The idea that the mathematics is logic in disguise goes back to Leibniz, Lebanese, sorry, goes back to Lebanese. I'm sorry, why did not see that word. Goes back to Lebanese. But in an earnest attempt to carry out the logic program, its detail could be made only when in the 19th century, the basic principles of central mathematics theories was articulated by Dedekind and Peano. The principles of logic were uncovered by Frege. Sorry, give me 1 second, everybody. Okay, stuff like that. Frege devoted much of his career into trying to show how mathematics can be reduced to logic. Frege, in 1884, he imagined to derive the principles of the second order, Peano arithmetic, from the basic laws of a system. The second order logic, sorry, his derivation was flawless. His derivation was flawless. However, he replied to he relied on one principle which turned out not to be a logic principle. After all, even worse, it is unattainable. The principle in question is Frege, basic law W. So you guys can see that. Let me blow that up so you guys can see it. Maybe you guys might get a better idea what this is, because I have no idea what that is. But let's look for X. I'm not sure that's X or not, but Fx equals X GR if, if only if A upside down XR Fx equals it's 3 lines there. So I don't know what 3 lines are. That's an equal sign, what that is. GX. So let me see if this explains it. Okay. So let me see if it explains, because I know I probably messed that all up. And let's try to explain it. See, this gives you an example of what that means. In words, the set of the F is identical with the set of the G's. So okay, I was right. If the F's are, there's two F's there on it. If the F's are precisely the G's, and a famous letter to Berg, Russell showed that the Berg basic law of B entails a contradiction. Russell in 1902. These arguments have come to be known as Russell's paradox. See section 2.4, okay. Russell himself tried to reduce mathematics to logic in other ways. Freud's basic law B entails that corresponding to every property of mathematics entitles their existence of class of mathematical entities having that property. This was evident to Strong, for it was exactly this consequence which led to Russell's paradox. So Russell postulated that only properties of mathematics objects that have already been shown to exist. Determined classes predicate that implicity referred to the class that they were to determine. If such a class existed, do not determine a class. This type structure of properties is obtained properties off ground objects, properties of ground objects, and classes of ground objects, and so on. This typical structure, sorry, this typical structure of properties determine a layered university of mathematical objects, starting from ground objects, proceeded to class of ground objects, then to the class of ground objects and class of ground objects, and so on. Unfortunately, Russell's found that the principles of this type of logic did not suffice for deducing even the basic laws of arithmetics. He needed, among other things, to lay down as a basic principle that there exists an infinite collection of ground objects. This could hardly be regarded as a logic principle. Thus, the second attempt to reduce the mathematics to logic also faltered. The word is faltered. And their matters to stood for more than 50 years. In 1983, Crispin Wright book on first theory of the natural number appeared, right, 1983 in it. Wright breathes new life into the logistic projects he observed with what Freud's derivation of sound order, arithmetic can be broken down into stages. In first stage, Freud used the inconsistent basic law B to derive what has come to be known as the Hume's principle. Okay. The number of F's equal the number of G's. If only F equal G. Where F equals G means that the F's and the G's stand in one-to-one correspondence with each other. This relation of one correspondence can be expressed in the second order logic. Then in second stage, the principles of the second order, arithmetics are derived from Hume's principles and the accepted principles of second order logic. In particular, basic law B is not needed to the second part of the derivation. Moreover, Wright conjectured that in contrast to Berg's basic law of V, Hume's principles and consistent George Boulos and others observed that Hume's principles is indeed consistent with Boulos' 1987. Wright went on to claim that Hume's principles can be regarded as truth of logic. If this is so, then at least the second order of Peano's arithmetic is reduced to logic alone. Thus, a new form of logicism was born. Today, this view is known as the neologicism. Hale and Wright, 2001. Most philosophers of the mathematics today doubt that Hume's principles is principle of logic. Indeed, even Wright later sought to qualify this claim. Nonetheless, many philosophers of mathematics feel that the introduction of the natural number through Hume's principles is attractive from an logical and from an epistemological, sorry, sorry, epistemology point of view. Limbaugh argues that because the left-hand side of Hume's principles merely recarves the content of its right-hand side, not much indeed from the value to make Hume's principles true. For this reason, he calls natural numbers and mathematical objects that can be introduced in similar ways like mathematical objects, Limbaugh, 2018. Wright's work has drawn the attention of a lot of philosophy. Wright's work has drawn the attention of philosophers of mathematics to the logic kind of principles in which basic law of B and Hume's principles are examples. These principles are called abstractions principles. At present, philosophies of mathematics attempt to construct general theories of abstraction principles that explain which abstraction principles are acceptable and which are not, and why, where 2003 by 2002 also has emerged that in a context of weekend versus second order logic, Berg's basic law of V is consistent, but these weak background theories only allow very weak arithmetic theories to be derived from basic law of V. Burgess, 2005. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop sharing. There's a lot to unpack based on what we have here. And mentally trying to get an understanding of the logic and philosophy of mathematics in the four schools that they were having. With school one, we're talking about logicism. Let me make sure I had that right. logic system. And yeah, it's very interesting when I'm looking at the ideas that they had and how they were trying to, at least this looks to be some form of geometry, or no, not geometry, but it seems like they were having some issues with Berg's work and what he put together. And again, there's some, but you also see a lot of people who contributed to this guy's work and kind of expounded on it, such as Pratt Wright and I believe another guy in 1987 who they mentioned who had contributed to his work, and Boulos, 1987, another contribute to the work of Fergs, and Limbo in 2018. I hope I'm pronouncing his names correct. These names are, and Burgos in 2005. So we have a lot of people who contributed to this guy's work and trying to get an understanding of what we consider to be logic today and how much of it came about, and so forth. Um, you know, I am, trying to put this information out and get an understanding of myself. Once again, I will tell you, even this here, now I'm reading, there's a lot to this to unpack, a lot that I quite don't understand. But I know there's some of you who are more educated and more adapted to speak on these matters. But I just want to try to take math and give my people an understanding of it, best that I can, because like many of them, we didn't always have a understanding of math, growing up, and how to apply it. So I'm looking at some of these guys and what they did, and it's written and seemed to be very complex, But when I look at the basic customs or systems that they had, they don't seem to be so tough. It is some parts that are tough, but it seems to be very interesting once you get a hold of what it is that is being explained. Now there's newfound theories where people are adding on to it, and I think that's where it gets complicated. But I think if we can find a way to stick to the root of it and get a clear understanding of what it is, what they were trying to convey. I think then we're working on we're getting somewhere. We're working on something. Um, but nonetheless, the learning of how to apply math or how to use math in our daily life is very vital and is very important. I watched a video today on more science, I found it on YouTube. Matter of fact, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to tell you the video that I saw, and let me get to it. And it was very interesting. Going to my channel right now, my YouTube channel, through my home TV. And the guy, you know, he made some very, interesting, he did a very interesting touch on sacred geometry. And that's another part of understanding all of what we see today as far as the sacred geometry that goes into religion and the 12 months and the 12 zodiac signs that are split in between those months, right? That's a very important part, right? That needs to be explained, right? Because it gives you the, I guess, hope I'm using the right word for this, but I think it gives you the esoteric and philosophical understanding of how math was applied to nature, right? And the understanding of how those things that apply to nature apply to you, right? As the seven hermetic principles that we have that are most common that we understand is the principle of mentalism. The all is mind and the mind is mental. No, the universe is mental. I'm sorry if I messed it up, but I believe, the all is mind is what we're looking at. And it goes into that science that everything within the universe exists within you, right? And, math was one of the great ways to explain it, to make it logical, to explain these things. And the video I was talking about, I had to been rambling for a little bit. The video I was talking about, if you guys gonna look it up, it's brother C. Freeman, L. Moorish, American Muslim. Okay, more science. Brother C. Freeman, L. Moorish, American Muslim. Investment frame of mind. That's the video that I was looking at. So again, I repeat it: Moorish scientist, Bro C. Freeman, L. Moorish American Muslim. It's interesting, you know, looking at his video. One of the things that he showed that was very interesting was the skull and bones explanation of how it wasn't something evil and how he broke it down into being part of the zodiac symbols and in the which in a way he explains this process and how it works. Now the video I'm looking at is an hour and 45 minutes long. And so I'm gonna have to go back and watch all of it myself, I'll be honest with you. I did watch it and I did find some stuff very interesting in the video. And I think that was good. Helped explain a couple of things. And there's another video that was really short called The Method of Morse by Zim 1912. It had 796 views and about 8 years ago. this video was put up. And it goes into some of the contributions of math that the Moors contributed to. And and how some of it was, I don't know, I would say taken, but it showed where they started, well, what their contributions were, and how others that we look at today, well, I'll let you just watch the video and see for yourself and explain it. But it goes into three basic characters, three basic people who were Moors, who contributed to math as we know it is today. Um, Now, I'll say I'm interested in learning this because this is definitely, a part or of African culture, and learning about it. And, just different Moors, and some of them white Moors, some of them black Moors, and their contribution to society, to mathematics. And trying to get an understanding of how these things happen, because, again, if we're really going to sit and study the art of nation building, you can know a lot of information about yourself, where you come from, language and things like that and stuff. I think that is important, right? But I think a very important piece that we have to look at is mathematics, the philosophy of math, how math is applied, this, all these different elements of mathematics. And again, everybody starts where they are. We don't have all the same information. We may not be all at the same place, but the important thing is that we at least make the attempt to get in the race. You can't run, you can't, play from the sidelines. It's important that we get in the race. However, your contribution to society is important we get into the race. And I think math, is my way of getting into the race and trying to spread an education, spread and educate myself through math. And it's a very odd thing for me. I'll be honest with you, it's a very odd thing for me. Is because in school, I hated math. I hated it. I thought, like most people, it's very challenging, very frustrating when I couldn't figure something out. Um, and I wanted to take the easy and lazy way out of understanding these things. And as I got into what I've always had in my mind, even as a kid, I've always had questions about religion and understanding certain things that were in the Bible and what they really meant, and how the stories that were being told to me as a kid just didn't make any sense. It doesn't make any reasonable sense. It's like I'll give you an example, right? It talks about Egypt, where God told Moses or to kill all the firstborn of Pharaoh. But then later before that, Pharaoh was also trying to kill all the firstborn, and all the firstborn Egyptians, and Moses was placed into a basket, right? So he wouldn't be destroyed. And I'm like, that for me, that doesn't make any logical sense, that he would kill all the firstborn. The reason why it doesn't make any sense. It's like, who would do that? The most valuable thing that people have, you know, or any nation has, is the women and its children. That was my understanding of why men went to war. Because if the men died, the women and children could be built in a sense, you know, but you know, in the sense that you would kill them so they couldn't rebuild would be one thing, but that wouldn't be an act of God saying do this, you know what I'm saying? That would be more man's intuition of how do we stop them from rebuilding. But even during even with that, right? When you would kill off the women in the firstborn, right? You wouldn't kill them because you would capture them and they would become your property, right? And and they would join your army. They would later be your servants, and you would teach them your custom, your ways, and you would improve and increase your army, make your numbers and armies larger, right? So, but again, that's my train of thought, my thinking, and so has to me it has to make sense, right? So when I actually think about the firstborn, right, firstborn sons, right, I I have this idea in my head, right, that okay, so let me say this to you, right, and this is just my thinking, my thought. I'm not saying that this is for everybody, right? And I can be totally wrong about what I'm about to say, right? But I'm going to give you, you know, my opinion, right? So from the earliest of times, right? And I'll say from Moses, not from Moses, before Moses, Abraham, okay, that when I think it was Abraham, father of Isaac, who became Israel, right? Who went to sacrifice his son to God on the mount to his son to God, right? And the angel came. I'm just paraphrasing all of this, right? So Moses, not Moses, Israel, who was who was Isaac, I believe, right? And biblical scholars and biblical Hebrew Israelites and all those who have a better understanding than me, I'm welcome to your explanation to explain this. But however, let me go into this when I say this, right? Israel, right, who was at the time Isaac, was being sacrificed by his father Abraham, right? And the angels came and stopped him and said not to sacrifice him, right? And I think he put up a goat or something later, right? Okay. Well, he was sacrificing his son. I believe this was an example of him sacrificing his son to the son. Because this is how they worship their God. They gave an offering to God for forgiveness, right? And that's what they believe. So he was giving an offering to his son to God, right? And this um, offering that he was giving his son to the sun God, right, may have happened, may have been the first example of the Passover. This is, like I said, this is my theory. I don't mind admitting I might be wrong, but I just want to open your minds to the possibilities of what this could be, right? He was giving, that was the first example of him sacrificing his son to the sun god. The later example, right, of them sacrificing their sons to the sun god was Egypt. When was Egypt, or for us, this prophet targets to say Kemet, right? Where the Pharaoh said, the Pharaoh wanted to kill all of the Jews or the Hebrews, their firstborn children, right? This may be um, another practice of another practice of the Passover, because, and I'll go into that later, why that could be a practice of the Passover, right? But that could be another practice of the Passover, right? And them trying to kill all of the firstborn sons, right? Now, I think the term firstborn son may not actually be firstborn sons as we think of it. It could be the first of spring. Then, because the spring would be considered the new sun, the new year, right? Because it wasn't always that we looked at the year as starting in the middle of the calendar. The year started from end of winter and beginning of spring. It ended in winter, and spring began the new year, right? So is it possible that this first born son was spring? So, and I believe that that was also in the Passover, because if you look during the time of Moses and Pharaoh's war, or when Pharaoh and Moses were at war, and Pharaoh went to talk to Moses to tell him this is what God said, blah blah, and tried to the Bible depicts it, get Pharaoh to free the Jews, right? Um, I think that I don't, well, for one, I will honestly say I do not believe this and have not found, and so far, most people, historians will say this as well. There is no historical evidence that the Jews were ever slaves in Egypt. So with that being said, I think the story is telling us about the the story is telling us about the Jews It's explaining the Passover. Sorry, I believe that the story is explaining the Passover celebration. Why do these stories explain the Passover celebration? Right? Because the Passover, right, starts from end of spring, end of winter, beginning of spring. I believe that this is a celebration of winter passing over into spring. The firstborn son is passing over from winter into spring, right? And why I say it's passing over from winter into spring, right, is because if you look at all the things that they were hit with the 10 plagues, right? Many of it are things that you see happen in the spring. Frogs, ants, I think it was not frogs, I think it was flies all over the place. Um, you know, all these, all these different things. I know babies die like that and stuff. I don't think baby thing is real, but a lot of these things you see, they were pestilence, right? They were pests that came out during the springtime of the year when the weather got warmed up, right? And that's an indication that this event happened during the spring equinox, on the spring equinox, right? Um, Even when you look at the story of Jesus, right? The Passover is 1914, which is also right there in the split of winter and spring. So all of these stories are actually just talking about the Passover, right? And the Passover that they're talking about, it seems to me to be a custom that I don't believe started, a custom that I don't believe started in yeah, a custom that I don't sorry, the custom that I don't believe started with the Jews, right? I believe that this custom started with the Egyptians, or also known what its prophet term as the Kemetics, as Kemet. That's where this custom started from. And I'm not sure if it originated with Kemet, or if the ancient Babylonians, you know, were also a part of this custom. But actually, I would have to say that, I believe that they were, because if you understand the buildings that they made, um, I had the video for the buildings earlier, but they had buildings that look similar to pyramids that are not pyramids. And in that building, they would, matter of fact, the Tower of Babel. That's another example. And thank you. Thinking that um it just hit me. So I just had to thank myself for that. But but the Tower of Babel, right? They were temples that they were building up to God, to praise God. And I'm gonna give me a sec. If I can find it. I'm gonna give you the name of the temple. What? That's it. Okay. But actually, Ben helped me out with that, and I didn't ask for it. I know sometimes this binge thing just pops up and starts rattling for you. Um, but the Tower of Babel is said to be an ancient ziggurat. Ziggurat. That's with the Z, as in zebra, ziggurat. Um, and how the ziggurat was a tower, or as a was a tower that they would build up, facing up toward the night sky, and they would, you know, pray to these things and do sun worship and so on and so forth, right? So all of this goes into that. All of this goes into that. All of this leads to all of this leads to that. And excuse me. Yeah. All of this kind of circles somewhere around the same thing. And I believe that that's what they were looking at. And I believe that we apply the knowledge in the math historically, we can also see what they were calculating, some of these very same ideas. So, that's my time right there. I'm gonna end it right here with that. I know you guys been with me for a long time. I appreciate you guys. I love, you know, to hear from you. Please leave a comment in the comment section. Like, share the video, subscribe. Um, I'm not here as a person who knows everything. You know, the saying goes, he who knows everything knows nothing at all, right? So I'm here as a student, and I'm just sharing my information that I'm looking up, and I'm hoping that many of you, you know, would also share your information if you have any, or your comment. I want to hear what you think as well, with me. I appreciate you. I thank you. Peace and love. And you guys take care of yourselves.